This is a piece of mail that was postmarked by my local post office. It's a hand cancel with a circular date stamp. This is the classic postmark in the United States, and many other countries for that matter. Lots of stamp folks collect these, trying to get them from a range of places, or certain places on important dates, or whatever. But I say no thanks to this snooze fest. I like postmarks from specific places on specific days, but I want something more than just a boring old circle. I want a dinosaur. I want a spaceship. I want Jimmy Carter's smiling face. And luckily, these exist in the form of pictorial postmarks. Let's dig in. You might have noticed that all of the examples I've shown so far are from the 1970s or more recent, which on the timescales of the Postal Service and the average stamp collector is actually pretty young. And it is the case that the pictorial postmark for special events is only about 50 years old. There are some caveats to that age of 50 years old. Just like when I discussed selvage designs in my Nature of America video, stamp exhibitions had blazed those trails a bit already, as did some huge events like American-hosted World Fairs. These types of expos would have special postal stations you could visit in order to buy special stamps and mail them out with special postmarks, and some of these had what we'd consider pictorial postmarks. On a side note, at some point I'm going to have to do a video about World's Fair stamps. Graham over at Exploring Stamps already did one about New York's in 1939, but I especially love the 1982 ones from Knoxville. But I digress. When I said that pictorial postmarks are only about 50 years old, I also said that only applied to ones for special events. There's another class that even novice collectors are familiar with, and they date back to the 1950s. Those are ones for first day of issue stamps. First day of issues and the older related idea of earliest known uses are a huge area of stamp collecting that I can't dive into in much depth here. As the name implies, these are stamps that were used on the first date possible. The Postal Service started giving these special postmarks starting in the 1930s, with the familiar bars and text look. In 1958, we got our first pictorial first day postmark on that year's gardening and horticulture stamp. That stamp honored Liberty Hyde Bailey, a professor at Cornell University, a school that has produced very little of value. These pictorial first day postmarks quickly became the norm, and today virtually every commemorative stamp receives one. Starting in 2005, the Postal Service expanded the offerings by introducing what they call digital color postmarks, alongside the standard black ink ones. These are actually how I choose to collect new stamps as they come out. These are laser printed onto the envelopes instead of stamped. There's also a class of postmarks referred to as fancy cancels, which you would think would be a term invented by the British, but they describe custom marks from 19th century America prior to the standardization of postmarks. The term also applies to some less unique examples since then, although they're sometimes interesting in their own right. In any case, they're not the same sort of one-day event commemoration this video is talking about. This leads us to special event pictorial postmarks. The Postal Service says that the first use of one of these was in 1971 for an event at the Smithsonian's National Museum of History and Technology, today known as the National Museum of American History. Coincidentally, I visited the museum last time I was in DC. For some reason, it has the sexiest George Washington statue you're ever going to see. Pictorial postmarks gained traction in the 1980s and still see regular use today. With all that said, I've kind of glossed over some of the basic questions about these things, like where do you find current events that have pictorial postmarks that you can get? Luckily, there's a centralized location where these get regularly announced, and that's the Postal Bulletin. Most of the bulletin is targeted towards post offices and their employees, unless you yourself are concerned about stolen money order forms, but near the back of each one will be a list of pictorial postmarks that are currently available. They also have a list of available first day of issue postmarks, which involve the same process to get. I've got a link to the USPS's site for the Postal Bulletin in the video description below. The second obvious question is, how do you get one of these postmarks? Well, at a basic level, you just need postage to be marked and something to put the postage on. For postage, you can use any stamps or combination of stamps you want. Some people like to use stamp designs that relate to the postmark. You just need to make sure that the amount of postage is enough to send it through the mail, even if you're not actually going to do that. As for what to put it on, that's up to you. You can use any random envelope you have around the house, or a postcard is another option. The standard, though, are these 6 3/4 envelopes. They measure 6.5 inches across and 3 5/8 inches high. You can buy these basically at any store that sells envelopes. They're kind of the standard small envelope size, but if you're planning on storing these long term, consider buying archival quality envelopes from specialty online shops. The ones you buy from Walmart are going to show age over time. If you do go with an envelope, you also have the choice of whether you want to decorate it before you get your postmark. This sort of envelope art is known as a cachet, and there's a deep world of collecting you can jump into surrounding these. There used to be multiple companies that did cachets for each first day of issue, but I think the fun stuff is the hand-drawn amateur ones. If you have that skill, it's a great place to show it off. I do not. Once you have your piece of mail prepped, you have a few different options for getting the postmark on it. The simplest would be to go to the event yourself and get it marked there. Granted, in most cases that's not practical, but you would save on some postage costs. If you can't make it though, you can mail your envelope or card within 30 days of the event date, and they'll postmark it for you and mail it back. If you do go this route, you can approach it in one of two ways. The first is to address the envelope or card that you want postmarked to yourself, stick it inside another envelope that you address to the event, and they'll return your cover back to you as mail. Just be sure to put something inside your envelope, like an index card, and tuck your flap. You are gambling a bit when you go this route. Now, some stations will put your cover inside another envelope to protect it through the mail, and actually my Biden inauguration postmark came wrapped in plastic and backed with cardboard, but this is the exception. You're probably going to get a barcode printed on the bottom of your cover, and you might even get a second cancellation over your pictorial postmark. It's also directly exposed to the mail stream, so there's always a chance of it getting dirty or damaged on the way. But these things might be okay to you. These envelopes come back looking like actual mail. If this does worry you though, another option is to use 3 envelopes. One is your cover, which now doesn't need to have an address on it, but it does still need the correct amount of postage. The second is an envelope that you address to yourself. After they make the postmark, the post office will put the cover in that envelope and mail it back to you. The third is the envelope that holds the other 2 that you address to the event station. This option requires 3 sets of postage and 3 different size envelopes, but it is the way to go if you want a pristine, protected cover. There's one last basic question worth asking. Where do these events come from? Like, why does Erie County's fair get a special pictorial postmark and not some other county's fair? Could I create an event with a pictorial postmark? And the answer is yes. I've put another link from the Postal Service in the video description below that goes through the process. I'm going to walk through the steps here, but I'm going to give the disclaimer that I've never set up one of these events myself. The first thing you need is an event that you want to commemorate. Now, I've already given a bunch of examples of what sort of events get these things, but there are some rules you have to follow about how they're represented. Political and religious groups in particular need to be careful. They can have postmarks to celebrate their events, but they can't promote certain ideals or campaigns on the postmark. If you're featuring a person or organization on your postmark, you need permission from them or their estates to do so. For instance, if I wanted to celebrate the birthplace of Jeff Probst, the hosted survivor, I'd need to submit his written permission. Or if I wanted to celebrate the founding of Pizza Hut, I'd need permission from their corporate headquarters along with my application for the postmark. With those restrictions in mind, you need to design your postmark. The maximum dimensions are 4 inches wide and 2 inches tall, and you need to keep in mind that this will be a rubber stamp, so you need a black and white image. You can't do shades of gray. Once you have an appropriate event and a good design for a postmark, the final step is to reach out to your local postmaster. They're going to be the ones helping you set up the station at the event, and also the ones receiving requests for the postmark for people who couldn't attend, so it's actually quite a bit of work for them. Postal regulations say you have to reach out to your postmaster at least 10 weeks in advance, so plan ahead. As you can see, it takes a decent amount of work to do one of these and a few months of lead time, all for an opportunity that very few Americans even know exists. Now, obviously I'd love to see the program expanded and more events offer these pictorial postmarks, but at the same time, the narrow niche of people who are called to do these leads to a mix of events I really love. A lot of small town festivals and anniversaries get a brief day in the sun thanks to these pictorial postmarks. You've got the Centennial Funk, Nebraska, a village with fewer than 200 people. You've got Pippin Fest, a celebration of pippin apples in the 500-person borough of Fairfield, Pennsylvania. And you've got one of my favorites, the Sit-in-Day Mai Festival of Stoughton, Wisconsin, my mom's hometown. Like I said in the introduction, these are a lot more interesting than a regular old circular date stamp postmark, and I encourage all of you to check them out. Thank you for watching. Thanks again. If you enjoyed this video, check out the other ones on my channel. And if you like that fake postmark I used at the start of the video, drop me some mail. I'll cancel something for you.